Hello and welcome to the Weekend Morning Edition. Well, every weekday on the programme between 9 and 11 on RTÉ1 and RTÉ News Now, we bring you the latest news, sport, business, arts and topical discussion. This week we heard from the TD trying to introduce a bill on criminalising the clients of prostitutes. Also, a giant of science, James Watson, one of those behind the discovery of the DNA double helix, spoke to us. The Irish author John Boyne was here to speak about his success, and a consultant dermatologist called for regulation for cosmetic procedures. We also heard from a photographer and author who has captured life inside Burma, and the RTÉ All-Ireland Drama Festival got underway. 60 years ago, last Thursday, details of a scientific breakthrough that would change our lives were published in the journal Nature. The paper detailed the double helix structure of DNA. Well, our science and technology correspondent, Will Goodbody, has been speaking to one of the paper's authors, James Watson. He first asked him about a series of lectures given here in Dublin by an Austrian physicist in 1943, which sparked Watson's interest in researching DNA further.
I read the book in either late in 45 or early in 46. And I was in my third year at the university, so I'd gone early, which was lucky, because if I hadn't gone to the university early, someone else would have found the DNA structure.
Of course, 60 years on, we now know so much about genetics, and of course it plays a massive role in our lives. But back then, when you made that discovery, did you really understand the full impact of what you had discovered?
You had to sort of think, well, it's beautiful, but is it true? It was true, you know, I knew I'd get a Nobel Prize because it was the answer. Darwin was still alive. You go and tell Darwin, this is finally, you know, this is the genetic material, this is a solid copy. You couldn't tell him about the code. There was lots you didn't know, but in a sense, what was missing from the origin of species was what carried the information.
What areas of genetic research underway today really excite you?
I'm interested in human genetics. I've also been interested for a long time on what genes were mutated to make cells cancerous. And with initially the hope that you could reverse the effect. Now I'm sort of convinced that genetics won't give us drugs against cancer. We have to know the biochemistry of the cell. So the people who really come up and cure the disease will be chemists, not geneticists.
And are there any areas of genetic research being carried out today that concern you, that worry you, either ethically or otherwise? No.
I mean, there's some people say, oh, it'd be too dangerous to know how to genetically modify humans, as if, you get a government which would, modify every newborn child in some way. That seems to me, rather improbable compared to the risk that, we'll have something which will give a child who otherwise wouldn't have a healthy life.
What's your view of the level of research that's been carried out in Ireland?
Well, beginning to be serious. Yeah, I mean, your investment of the past 40 years has paid off. And there are some very good people here.
There's currently a debate underway here in Ireland at the moment about whether or not state-funded research should yield an economic return in science. What's your view on that?
Ireland just has to be good in technology, and it takes a long while. You can say, well, we don't yet have a major drug company. You've had some just at the borderline. Ireland has to be good in organic chemistry. You have to, you have to train. You have to be able to make drugs. You have to, or agricultural chemicals or something. You have to have a serious university system. It's very important to make science appealing, or that to young people, asking the question not what happens, but why does it happen? Just satisfy their curiosity.
throughout your life, I think it's fair to say that you've made comments that have proven quite controversial and at times have proven hurtful to people. During a lecture in San Diego at the Salk Institute last month, you referred to the historic curse of the Irish, which you said is not alcohol and is not stupidity, but it's ignorance. What did you mean by that?
Your brain isn't filled with useful things. You can be real dumb, or you can seem dumb because you don't know anything. And that's all I'm saying is the Irish seemed dumb because they didn't know anything, but they weren't stupid. So, I mean, there's a great difference because stupidity can be cured.
Well, now to Storybud. It's a 2-minute film that has been a huge YouTube success with over 100,000 people viewing it in over 30 countries. Its director, Jenny Keogh, is now looking for money to turn it into a feature film. And Jenny joins me now, but first of all, we're going to take a quick look at the film.
Well, what about you?
All right there, Bosco.
What's going on yourself?
You're right, chum. How's about you?
Hello, well.
Lang where are you going with that? Are you musha or are you from Nana?
Well, horse.
How's you cutting?
What part of the parish are you from?
A guard wouldn't ask me that.
The fiends were reeking because they got caught by the shades.
You're what? I didn't do nothing.
Say nothing for a while, and then say nothing at all.
There was ructions around the square last night.
Talk it down, boy. We were haunted.
You're an awful yap.
I didn't say that, and so I didn't.
Say nothing to no one about nothing. I keep saying it.
Okay, well, that's a clip of the film. Jenny, thank you for coming in this morning. It's been a huge success, hasn't it, that film? Tell me about some of the figures on it.
Yes, well, the Storybud, the original film, is all Dublin-based phrases and expressions, and that's up to over 100,000 views now on YouTube. And that film there is called How's About You, which is kind of a teaser to what I could do if I was able to travel the country and focus on every county and get phrases and expressions from every county.
And so that's what you're trying to raise funding for at the moment?
Yes.
Crowdfunding, how does that work?
Well, crowdfunding is really a platform for artists of any genre, whether it be music, film, TV, media, to really pitch their idea to the public and request funding. It's normally a modest amount in comparison to what you would go for if you were going to a board or something like that. So really you're asking people to have faith in your project and be a patron to your work.
So how much are you asking for and how do people give it to you?
Okay, well, I'm asking for 16,500 to complete the whole project from start to finish.
Which isn't bad at all. You're talking a feature length thing here, are you?
Yes, yeah. So really I've kept costs as low as possible because for the films so far, the short films, I've produced, directed and edited them myself. Right. So I intend to keep the crew quite small if I can, while hopefully employing an editor and stuff like that for the finishing work.
16.5 grand, and how much are you looking for from your patrons, as you put it?
Well, people can pledge from €5 up when they go onto the Fund It website, and rewards start from €15 up. So really,
what's that mean? What's
rewards? Yeah, so really to incentivise people to pledge. Say from €15, I guarantee that the name will be on the end of the film as a thank you and a poster with for Storybud. Whereas then rewards that can go up from that would be, say, a copy of the DVD with a special introduction from the director, to a digital download, to tickets to the screening in a cinema, right, to the transcript.
And how's it going so far, Jenny?
Well, I've really just launched it in the last couple of weeks, so I think Fund It is kind of a new concept really for people in Ireland. So it's taken off now, but yeah. I think it's important to say as well, if people pledge now, they don't pay now. Money only comes from your account if the whole project gets funded. Okay. So it's an all or nothing campaign. So if it's not funded fully to the amount, well then no money is taken from any account. If it is, well then everyone's delighted and you've pledged towards the project and you get your reward at the end of it. So yeah, it's a collaborative process, and you know it's to get everybody involved really.
Yeah. And Jenny, can I take you back, I mean, to the original film? Like, where did it come from? How did you get into making this type of a film? I mean, it's crossover, isn't it, between film and art, really? Well,
it is, and I suppose what I wanted to do was really start to get our expressions down on film to try to preserve our language, because what I realised over the last probably 5 or 6 months as well, there's a lot more people talking about how Irish people express themselves. Yeah. And we got talking one night about, you know, your granny's expressions and, you know, oh, my belly thinks my throat is cut, and all these things you would have heard as a child. And, you know, know, and then we realised, well, actually a lot of it is dying out. I mean, due to, I suppose, a lot of American influence, and you know, a lot of children's language is becoming very kind of mainstream.
It's much more homogenised, isn't it, now, the expressions? Yeah.
So I just thought I'd try to get a lot of it down, and while introducing younger people to the older phrases, likewise vice versa. So.
And are they actors or are they real people in the film?
No, they're real people.
They're real people, yeah.
Friends and family who have dug in and helped me out, and I've forced them to get in front of us, the camera, and while they're there, it's amazing. They really come out of their shells. Like, I might have a list of phrases that I'd like them to say, and then they just do stuff off the cuff and on the spot, and it's great fun as well. I mean, I would be behind the camera trying to hold my laugh in, you know.
Yeah.
So it's been great in that regard. So if we could preserve the language, because it's such a lively language, and you know, it's great global appeal as well. I've had messages from all over the world with people saying, please do my county, or I can't wait for your next film, or you know.
So that's what you want to do now, go around the country and preserve the expressions before they die out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, well listen, Jenny, the very best of luck with it.
Thank you so much.
Funded.ie, is it?
Funded.ie is where you can pledge, or people can go to my website, which is jennykeogh.com. They can view both short films there, and there's a link to the Funded as well.
Super. Thanks a million for coming in this morning. I'm joined now by one of the most successful Irish authors currently writing. John Boyne has written 8 novels for adults and 3 for children, including the international bestseller The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, which was also made into a feature film. His latest novel, This House is Haunted, is just out, and he joins me now. John, thank you so much for coming in this morning. The book is terrific. I mean, I'm really enjoying reading it. But tell me, it's a new genre for you, really, isn't it? A ghost story. How did you get into this?
Well, I've written a lot about the past before. This is set in 1867, and I do enjoy writing historically based novels. But I had wanted to write a ghost story for, I don't know, 10 years.
Really?
Yeah, but because ghost stories are great fun, you know, and I loved M.R. James and The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, and Dickens wrote so many good ghost stories.
So you like a bit of a scare, kind of?
I do. If it's kind of a literary nature, you know, where it really leaves you kind of thinking, there's more suspense in it. So I like a ghost story, but you can't write one until you really have a good idea for it. So I had to wait until I got one, and once I did, I thought, that's it, I've got to write it.
Yeah,
but
I mean, it's really quite chilling, some of this book.
I hope so. The title had been with me for about 8 or 9 years, way before I wrote the book. I always said to my publisher, at some point I'm going to write a ghost story called This House is Haunted, because I just like the title.
So you started with the title?
I started with the title on this one and worked it out from there. Yeah.
I mean, basically it's about, it's a governess goes to...
Yeah, it's 1860s, a young woman whose father has just died, and she takes up a position as governess in a big house in Norfolk. So there's lots of fog and little children who are in the house with no parents. And there's a mystery going on, and everybody in the village seems to know that there's something wrong with the house. Whenever she tells people she's the new governess, the people kind of rear back in fright almost. So over the course of the story, she's trying to figure out what has happened here, because there's clearly something still going on, because she keeps getting attacked by forces unseen.
Yeah, and then she finds out the previous governesses have died.
There's 4 before her who have all died in mysterious circumstances over the course of a year. Nobody has told her this before she's arrived. So she has to kind of be almost like a sleuth to figure it all out, and she is a brave character. I think she's quite strong-willed. She's nobody's fool, and she's going to figure out.
And she's only 21. That's enough of the story. You'll have to buy the book, I suppose, for the rest of it. But I mean, John, just to your own career, I mean, you're what? Well, you were telling me it's your birthday today. You're 42 today. Happy birthday. But I mean, you've had an extraordinary number of books at this point in your career. I think it's 8 for adults and 3 for children. When did you first start writing?
Well, I've been writing since I was a kid, and right through my teenage years I started taking it quite seriously, and I got my first short story published in the Sunday Tribune when I was at the end of my teens.
Really?
Yeah, so I was always very focused on it, and you know, I was doing writing courses in my 20s. You know, I started writing novels. I got my first novel published 13 years ago now. So you know, it was a slow build, because you know, Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, which obviously was the one that brought me to attention, was actually my 5th published novel, and before that, you know, they've been published, but you know, to neither. Not to deafening silence, as they say. So you know, it can take a while to build.
But equally, I think it was after your 3rd book that you went full time as a writer.
Yeah.
So you were obviously making enough money off them to be able to.
No, I wasn't at all.
Okay.
I wasn't making any money, but I had to move. I was living in Dublin at the time, and I moved down to Wexford, and took a house on the beach for a while when I was writing the 3rd novel. And it was really because I'd been working so hard. Used to work in Waterstones, and it was taking up all my time. And I thought, well, I'm either a novelist or I'm a bookshop manager, and I had to kind of make a decision. And even if I couldn't afford to, the decision had to be made.
That was a brave decision, really, wasn't it?
I think it was, but it was. I was at a point. Maybe at that point it was 10 years ago, so I was 32, and it was one of those moments in life where you decide your life's either going to go this way that you wanted to, or it's not. So.
Yeah, and I suppose peak of the boom, you could always have gone backwards at that point.
Yeah.
But Boyne, the Striped Pyjamas changed everything. I mean, since that book, will this be an automatic bestseller now because of your name?
There's no such thing, really. But what I am fortunate on is that what I didn't have before Striped Pyjamas that I have now is a lot of international publishers. So, the book gets published in different languages and so on. But you never know. I mean, some books that you look back and think maybe that's not my best one, does quite well, and then a book that you think is really good doesn't do so well. You can't control any of that. As a writer, the only thing you can control is the novel that you're writing, the quality of it, and what happens after that is completely out of your hands.
And how happy are you with this one?
I'm really happy with it. I think it's fun, actually. The last adult novel I wrote, The Absolutists, was very, very serious and a very bleak tone to it. And this, the ghost story, it just seems like fun to me.
It's a total page turner. I mean, you can't put it down once you start, and it's very accessible as well.
I hope so. I mean, I was saying to you before that often the word page turner, some people think is an insult, but actually, as a reader, that's what I want. The books I read, I want to not be able to put them down.
Yeah, well, there's nothing worse, is there, than picking up and going, oh God, I have to give it another go. Certainly not in this one. But I mean, it's interesting as well. You've done, as you said there yourself, a lot of your books is set in historical times. I mean, is research a very big part of your work as a novelist?
It is. Not so much with this one, because this is really just a work of pure imagination, but certainly with The Absolutists, which was about the First World War, House of Special Purpose, which was about the Russian Revolution, Boyne, the Striped Pyjamas, obviously.
Yeah.
You have to know an awful lot. Crippen, yeah. You have to know an awful lot about what you're writing about. But there's an instinctive thing comes where you can read a lot, you can know a lot, but you have to know when to put all that stuff aside as well, because your first duty is really to the story, not to the facts. And you have to know when to put it aside and then just start writing and see where that takes you. And I always find that I'll research before I start writing, but a lot of the research comes in second or third drafts, because then you know what it is that you don't know.
So you've found the holes that you need to fill in.
Exactly, and you didn't know that at the start when you started writing the thing. So you get to the end and you think, okay, well actually there's a scene here where they're on a, they're travelling from here to here. Well, how did they go? Did they go on a horse? Did they go on what do they call carriages or taxis in the 1850s?
How far is it?
So yeah, you have to kind of find that out, but you didn't know at the start. So
okay, well listen, John, it's a great book, and thank you so much for coming in this morning. Now, in recent years, cosmetic procedures like fillers and Botox have become increasingly sought after, with more and more people getting them done. But while the demand has rocketed, there has been no corresponding growth in the regulation of the sector. So what kind of problems are now being seen? Well, I'm joined by Rosemary Coleman, a consultant dermatologist. Rosemary, thank you very much for coming into us this morning.
Thank you for inviting me.
First off, can you quantify the kind of increase in interest in these cosmetic procedures? How many people are looking for them now?
It's hard to quantify exactly, but it is a multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide, and it's on the increase despite the recession.
Here in Ireland?
Throughout the world, and in Ireland indeed.
And I suppose a multi-billion industry, with that kind of money, all kinds of people are getting involved in this.
Exactly right.
So who is providing, I mean, we're talking things like fillers and Botox, I suppose, primarily, are we? These are injectables, but who's doing it here in Ireland?
Well, they're certainly the most popular treatments. And who's doing it? Well, the people who should be doing it are fully qualified doctors, preferably dermatologists, but there are far too few of us to go around, and I understand that. The big problem is that people are pretending they have qualifications that they don't. And the public has been inundated by advertising, websites, Groupons, and all these special deals of everybody saying they have an interest in dermatology. Now, having an interest in dermatology does not make you a dermatologist. So the patient often feels that they are getting treated by a qualified individual, which is not the case. And it's not been regulated. So while the Medical Council's website is very user-friendly, and it is very easy for any member of the public to go online and to see if the doctor they're going to go to is a specialist, they don't. And the trouble is, it's not been enforced.
Okay, well listen, let's take a look at some pictures that we have here of what can go wrong. Okay, what's happened here?
Somebody had a filler injected here, and one of two things has happened. Either they've had an allergic reaction, or this could also represent a condition called sarcoidosis, which happens to be very common in Ireland, occurring at the site of the filler. So unless the person...
Look at this one here now,
Now this is the most serious complication of a filler, and this is the one that worries me most, because this person had a filler injected into the glabellar area, which is between the eyebrows, where there's a superficial blood vessel, and the blood vessel was either blocked or compressed.
I'm just going to take you on here.
And
that's the
end result. Now, for that other lady, her entire central forehead will become necrosed and gangrenous, like the tip of this person's nose.
That's gangrene due to a filler?
That's tissue death, which is the same. And it's tissue death, and that will result in a scar and will have to be corrected by plastic surgery. And the big problem is that if people don't know the anatomy, and with all due respect, I don't believe beauty therapists get 2 years of anatomy training like we do. If they don't know the anatomy, they don't know where to avoid, and indeed everybody is different. And more importantly, if something does go wrong, they're not in a position to actually fix it, because they're not licensed to inject the drugs that could dissolve out that filler urgently if you recognise that this is happening. So there are treatments which we can do if we spot it very quickly. But if you don't know what you don't know, how are you going to recognise it?
Okay, so two key problems in that. One, they don't know where they're putting it in the first place, they don't know the anatomy, and two, they don't know how to reverse it. I suppose a lot of people watching would say, now listen, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. You as a dermatologist or representing dermatologists, you want to keep that industry for yourselves. You don't want to let other practitioners in, so you would say this.
Well, and I can understand your perspective. As it turns out, from where I'm sitting, I'm 23 years in dermatology. I have a year's waiting list. I couldn't possibly meet all the needs out there. I would just like the public to be protected, because I get phone calls many Monday mornings to the secretary saying she has to see me today. My face has been burnt by a laser. I've dreadful lumps. I've had an awful reaction. I don't know what's going on, and I can't actually see all these people on a Monday morning to fix it.
Really? So every week you're getting these calls?
At least twice a month, on a Monday morning in particular. I don't know what happens over the weekend, but everybody seems to go out, use their special deals and run into trouble with unqualified people doing treatments that they shouldn't be doing with no training.
So an area that needs to be looked at. Rosemary Coleman, thank you very much indeed for coming in this morning. Well, now to brave new Burma, a photographic account of 20 years in Burma under military rule. The book is being launched today in ICTU's headquarters in Dublin, and its author, award-winning journalist Nick Dunlop, joins me now. Nick, thank you very much for coming in this morning. It's a really beautiful book. I just start, I suppose the first thing we see in the book is this range of portraits of people in Burma. It very quickly makes the basic problem in Burma clear, doesn't it? It's the mix of ethnic people who live there.
That's right. I mean, it's one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. There are, I think, 135 ethnic groups with their own beliefs, their own languages, living in outlying areas. And that lends itself to the whole complexity of the problem, which often has been portrayed as a simple morality play between Aung San Suu Kyi versus the military regime. And of course, it's much more complex.
But and what is the complexity? It is the ethnic groups living there that they are not getting their rights. There is an ongoing military struggle going on in the north of the country still.
That's right. I mean, Burma is host to the world's longest ongoing civil war, and last 2 years ago, a ceasefire in the north of the country broke down, whilst a whole lot of other ceasefires were in place. And so the war continues in the north, and this goes down to basic sort of a denial of basic rights in those areas, a persecution of minorities by the military.
Okay, well listen, let's take a look at some of the photos from your book. I mean, this is Aung San Suu Kyi there herself. When were you there to get that, or when did you take that? Tell me the story of that one.
Well, that was taken in after her first term under house arrest, and this was taken in her home. These are photographs of her famous father, who's the independence hero of Burma. And I like this photograph simply because it lends itself to that whole idea of being incarcerated, of being in isolation. This is during a meeting of her executive committee of her party. So I wanted to get this sort of siege-like atmosphere that prevailed at the time when she was being watched. Her movements were severely, restricted.
Yeah, and this is some of the military now in Burma.
And this is the military. These are some of the last pictures I got for this project, and I was invited to go and photograph. I think it was 15,000 troops on a parade ground.
15,000?
Yeah. So they've got one of the largest militaries in Southeast Asia. It's one of the largest standing armies. But it's also
about 500,000 in the army, isn't there?
Well, it's somewhere in the region of 350,000. But of course, when you think of how many people that actually employs, it makes the Burmese military the single biggest employer in the country.
And the most powerful thing. Now, what is this here? This is
Insane Prison. This was built by the British during the colonial period, yes. And it was built to house something like 2,500 prisoners.
Wow.
Now, many political prisoners have been incarcerated here, including Aung San Suu Kyi. At the time that this photograph was taken, I took from a commercial airliner that happened to be flying overhead. There were somewhere in the region of 10,000 prisoners, many of them political prisoners.
10,000. And what is the situation there now, do you know, in the prison?
Well, more political prisoners have been released. There's still others that are still incarcerated. Torture is endemic throughout Burmese prisons. So this was a photograph that was very difficult to get because you can't get anywhere near the prison, or at least at that time you couldn't.
It's incredible, 10,000 prisoners in there. And I mean, there has been some change in Burma over the last few years. There were elections in 2010, I think. I mean, on your last visit to Burma, how were things? Have things improved at all?
Well, it was amazing because you could talk openly about politics with ordinary people, and that never happened before. I mean, to even mention Suu Kyi's name would have been, you know, a fearful thing to have done. So it's very difficult to remember almost what it was like before. So this radical program of reform has changed things immeasurably, but other things remain the same. And of course, we've seen a rise in ethnic tensions and open violence between Buddhists and Muslims now. Right. So whilst a lot of things have changed, a lot of things remain the same, and some things have degenerated.
Right, and this picture here now, obviously a family struggling. This is an older one, is it? Or?
Yeah, this is one of the first photographs I took on the Thai-Burma border. These people had fled the Burmese army who had attacked their village and burnt it down to the ground. They had arrived in a refugee camp, having trekked through the forest for about, 3 days. They all had malaria, they all had TB. So it was one of the first sort of pictures I took, and it sort of spoke to that whole idea of victimhood. Something which I think is, again, illustrated in a photograph like this. This was several years later, after an offensive against another ethnic minority who were fighting against the Burmese army. And the refugees caught up in that crisis.
There's still quite a number of Burmese refugees in the neighbouring countries.
Yes, there are indeed. There are many. I mean, many have fled as migrant workers, but many refugees remain in camps where they're stuck. And we're waiting to see if there will be repatriation. Of course, they're still fearful because the Burmese military have persecuted them for many, many decades.
Yeah. And I know when the elections were held, there was a lot of cynicism, if you like, in the international community. It was seen that the military had skewed the constitution, that they'd really made certain that they were going to remain in power. From what you're saying, it seems to have worked out a bit better than people expected.
I mean, I think people were very optimistic initially, but also sceptical. I mean, we have to remember that Burma has been under military dictatorship for almost 50 years. So it's a long time, it's nearly half a century. So people have been, sceptical of it, but the changes that have taken place are significant. But there are many other questions that remain unanswered. And we have, the military is still in control. We can't expect a transition that's seamless and overnight after so long a time under military rule. So it's an ongoing process, and I think there's worrying signs now that things are actually getting worse rather than getting better.
Really? In what way?
Well, I mean, with all this violence, for example, between Buddhists and Muslims, and we have more fighting in other areas of the country, not just in the north. With investment going in there. I mean, it's a strategically placed country, so it's very important.
But it's very fragile.
And it's very fragile, and the whole issue of human rights has taken a backseat.
Right. Okay, well listen, I mean, you write in this book as well. It really is a beautiful book with beautiful photographs, and that's been launched tonight in Dublin. What time is that in?
That's at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock,
yeah.
Okay. Well listen, Nick, thank you very much indeed for coming in, and best of luck with the book.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Now, efforts are underway to build a new isolation unit at Temple Street Children's Hospital here in Dublin. And this weekend, over 1,000 people are planning to get on their bikes and cycle around County Meath to help raise funds for it. Our reporter Aisling Reardon visited the hospital to find out more.
It's long overdue. St Joseph's top flat ward in Temple Street Children's Hospital is getting renovated. As part of the work being done, the funds raised by the Cycle for Life planned for this Saturday will be used for a new isolation unit. Divisional Nurse Manager Susan Mulrain tells me what the old one was like.
This is what was one of the single isolation rooms within the area, and as you can see, even though in its stressed down state, it still wasn't very good to begin with. We only had like single oxygen point, no wall suction, which is very important. The isolation area in relation to even to the door and access for a patient was always a bit tight. We had our ensuite bathroom here, which again only gave access to able-bodied children. We didn't have access for disabled children. So all of these issues have become hugely important for our patients accessing the ward. And the patient population, as they get older and they need more facilities, this has become a really big problem.
It's not going to be cheap at a cost of €200,000. However, it's well needed.
Most of the children who will begin the hospital here from time to time may require isolation, either to protect them from the children around them or to protect the children around them from them. And so therefore we need proper air handling, which we've never had within most of the, certainly within this area of the hospital. We then also obviously want some facility for our parent within our isolation rooms. We also need the basics of our, oxygen suction, basic technology to support our patients when they're in here. We can look after children, say, from cystic fibrosis to children with MRSA to children who require protection for their own immunocompromised states, which can happen from time to time.
Now, we've just come from the top flat ward where we've seen the start of the renovation work taking place on the isolation unit. We're going to head into the surgical flat ward where they actually have some up-to-date isolation units, and we'll get to see, with the money raised, what the isolation unit in the top flat ward will potentially look like. Linda's son Adam is currently in one of the new isolation units in this ward, but they know only too well the difficulties of staying in the old one.
As my son is a wheelchair user, he needs a lot of space. He's a big lad. The cubicles are quite small. The length we've been in top flat, and there has been no renovations, no updating for kids with needs like Adam's, and generally other kids that come in as well. Adam will be here for a couple more years, but other kids that will come in are much younger and will need greater needs and facilities for them, and it's hugely important for the fundraising to be getting done to renovate top flat and get some stuff that we need.
It's hoped the renovation will be completed by September before the winter kicks in, with all proceeds from the cycle being put to good use.
Aisling Reardon reporting there, and you can still register for the cycle. All you have to do is go to www.cycleforlife.ie, and there you can find all of the details. Well, now to drama, and the RTÉ All-Ireland Drama Festival got underway in Athlone last night. 9 drama groups from all over the country have made it into the finals, and they are performing and competing for the title. The winner is going to be announced next Friday night. Karina Buckley joins us now from Athlone. Karina, thanks a million for joining us.
My pleasure, Keelan.
You were at the opening night last night. How did it go?
It was an excellent play. It was actually an Irish premiere of The Boys Next Door, written by Tom Griffin and performed by the Estuary Players. But of course, before the show could go on, we had to have some ceremonial words of wisdom from a theatrical luminary. That is the tradition. And this year, the honour went to Eamon Morrissey. Now, we'll be familiar with him from his role as Cass in Fair City, but he's a very distinguished actor and director on the professional stage. And he has had links with the amateur drama movement in the past. He has adjudicated a number of festivals, but his relationship with the amateur movement hasn't always been harmonious, as he told us last evening.
It used to sicken us in Dublin because there we were trying to scratch a living out of nothing, and it seemed at the same time that the country was awash with amateur drama. Every hall, every club, every shed in the country was packed with local groups doing their thing. But at the same time, there wasn't a lot going on in Ireland, and what amateur drama was doing was providing each local community with the experience of live theatre, with the experience of that interaction between the stage and the audience, and that's what theatre is about.
That's fascinating, Karina, that kind of conflict between the amateur sector and the professional sector. Now, you also spoke last night to the adjudicator. Just tell me now, every night a different drama group is going to be performing its play, and what will happen over the next week?
So every night the drama group will take to the stage at 8 o'clock in the evening. After the performance of the play, the festival adjudicator, this year it's Tony Rushford, he gives his public adjudication. So he outlines what he felt the strengths and the weaknesses of the production were, and he gives us a flavour of really what we might expect on opening night. He gives us some clues on the awards night. He gives us some clues as to how he thought the play went, how they dealt with the text, how the production worked with or against the script.
It's pretty stressful, Karina, isn't it, to get an immediate judgment like that, and that the adjudicator, whoops, Karina, we have you back, that the adjudicator immediately gives his analysis of how your play was.
Yeah, it's unusual that you'd get that instant feedback. You know, professional theatre groups or ordinary theatre groups would often wait for the reviews in the papers and have a little bit of time to think and reflect on how their own performance had gone on the particular night. But no, they get it immediately, and it's something that they're used to really at this point. They'd have gone through it on the festival circuit throughout the qualifying stages, so it would be something that's familiar to them. And you know, everybody understands that every adjudicator is different, and everybody will have their own opinion. And some of the flourishes that were added in, say, last night's production went down really well with adjudicators on the festival circuit, but not as well with the festival adjudicator.
With the main man. Let's hear some of what Tony had to say last night.
I asked 3 questions. It sounds very simple. The first question is, what kind of a play are they doing? Do they understand this play that they're doing? How well are they doing it? And what is the overall dramatic achievement of the work?
Okay, so that's what he's looking for in the plays. What did he make of last night's?
Well, last night he had a few reservations. He felt that the work that we saw last night it's a gentle comedy. There's a lot of pathos in it, as we discussed yesterday. It centres around a care home for 4 mentally disabled gentlemen and their carer, Jack, who is on the verge of burnout. And so there is a lot of pathos, naturally enough, in a situation like that. A lot of comedy within the script. He felt at times that the comedy was pushed at the expense of the pathos. He also felt that some of the staging decisions worked a little against the flow of the piece, like there were longer blackouts that he felt could have been shortened. Difficult to see how that could have been done because it was necessary for scene changes and things like that. And also there were some elements of the way the set was structured that he felt also worked against the production on the whole. But the performances, he had high praise for the performances, and he really, overall, he was very impressed with the production itself.
Okay, so not a rave last night. Now, I think All My Sons is going to be performed tonight. That's by the Thurles Drama Troupe, is that correct?
That's correct. Thurles will perform All My Sons tonight, and we'll have one of the youngest performers at the festival on stage, actually the youngest, and you'll see him in the clip that we're going to see.
Well, listen, Karina, thanks very much for joining us this morning, and enjoy the weekend of drama down there, and we'll take a quick look at a clip now of All My Sons, tonight's performance.
On my word of honour, there's a jail in the basement. I showed you my gun, didn't I?
But that's a hunting gun.
That's an arresting gun.
Then why don't you ever arrest anybody? Tommy said another dirty word to Doris yesterday, and you didn't even demote him.
Tommy, he's a dangerous character. What word does he say?
Oh, I can't say that.
Give me an idea.
I can't. It's not a nice word.
Whisper to me. I'll close my eyes, maybe I won't even hear it.
I can't, Mr. Keogh.
Don't make him do that. Okay, Bert, I'll take your word for it. Now, go out and keep those eyes peeled.
For what?
For what, Bert? The whole neighbourhood's dependent on you.
That was the Thurles Drama Group performing All My Sons there. And that's some of what we covered over the week on Morning Edition. We're with you every weekday morning between 9 and 11 on RTÉ1 and RTÉ News Now. The programme is on Twitter at RTÉ Morning Edit, and our email is morningedition@rte.ie. But for now, from me and from everyone here on the Morning Edition team, goodbye.